We've all felt that sting, the one that comes when someone we cared about deeply ends up being the source of our pain. Maybe he ghosted you. Maybe he said all the right things and then did the exact opposite. Maybe he made you feel like you were the problem, and now he expects you to fall apart, to chase, to beg. But what if instead of giving him the reaction he expects, you gave him something else entirely? What if instead of crumbling, you stood tall? What if your response didn't come in the form of angry texts or late night calls, but in silence, in strength, and in mystery? Because the truth is, when a man hurts you, the most powerful move isn't to fight. It's to confuse him, to disrupt the emotional pattern he thought he could control, to show him that the woman he underestimated is far more powerful than he ever imagined. This has to do exactly that. When a man hurts you, your first instinct might be to confront, to demand answers, to cry, to scream, or to try to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he's caused you. That's natural, because when someone you care about deeply wounds you, it rattles your sense of self, your expectations, and your emotional balance. But here's the twist. The most disarming, most powerful thing you can do in that moment is not to react the way he expects. Instead, you confuse him. And you do it by responding with composure, clarity, and dignity. This is not about playing games. It's about power, your personal power. It's about reclaiming the narrative that someone tried to write for you without your permission. When a man hurts you, he's often not expecting strength. He's not expecting you to remain calm, poised, and unfazed. He might expect drama, accusations, or desperation. But when you don't give him that, when you respond with silence or with a simple, non-emotional okay, you introduce an energy he can't control. That's what confusion really is in this context. It's emotional dissonance. He expected to see chaos, but instead he sees peace. And that peace is unnerving. Imagine he says something cruel. Or he withdraws affection suddenly, maybe pulls away or starts treating you like you're no longer a priority. Instead of rushing in to fix it or prove your worth, you take a breath. You observe, you detach, you let him sit in his own discomfort while you stay grounded in your self-respect. That moment becomes a mirror for him because now you're not reacting out of hurt, you're responding with maturity. That confuses his assumptions about you, and it often causes him to start questioning his own actions. He's left wondering, why isn't she chasing me? Why isn't she reacting the way I thought she would? And that internal questioning is powerful. It creates space in his mind where you now occupy a different role. Not someone he hurt and dismissed, but someone who stood up silently and made him face his own behavior. Most people want a reaction. They want to feel powerful enough to shake you. So when you're unshaken, you disarm them. You also regain your own clarity. When you refuse to act on impulse, you give yourself time to think. You don't get pulled into emotional chaos. You stay above it. And that's not just for him, that's for you. You protect your peace. You show yourself that you don't have to stoop to low behavior just because someone else did. You're not here to play emotional ping pong. You're here to live a life of value and meaning, and if someone disrupts that, they don't get to also control how you respond. Confusion is not about manipulation. It's about breaking the cycle. It's about doing something so unexpected that it jolts the other person into awareness. A man who hurts you expects you to be a version of yourself that needs his validation. When you take that need off the table, when you choose your dignity over your desire to be understood, you turn the dynamic upside down. Suddenly, the man who thought he had emotional leverage finds himself on unstable ground. And in that moment, your calm is more powerful than any insult. You are no longer trying to make him see your worth, you're showing it. You are choosing peace over performance. And that kind of presence, that kind of emotional intelligence is magnetic. It stays with people. It lingers in their minds. It makes them reflect, not because you try to change them, but because you refuse to let them change you. So the next time a man hurts you and expects chaos, give him calm. When he expects tears, give him distance. When he expects anger, give him silence. Because that silence holds weight. That calm carries power. And that unexpected response, it leaves a mark far deeper than any argument ever could. When someone hurts us, especially someone we care about, we tend to fall into patterns. These patterns are shaped by fear, rejection, abandonment, and the deep desire to be seen and understood. But here's something most people never learn. If you keep responding the way they expect, the emotional dynamic never changes. And that's where your power lies, in doing something different, in shifting the entire emotional experience they thought they could control. Let's say he's pulled away. He's become cold, distant, dismissive. Maybe he even said things designed to hurt you, consciously or not. Your mind races with questions. Why is he doing this? What did I do wrong? How do I fix it? And in that panic, you want to act. You want to text, call, explain, cry, do something that might bring him back or get him to see your worth. But that action, while understandable, keeps you in the dynamic he's set. He leads, you follow. He pulls, you chase. He disappears and you try harder. So what happens when you don't do that? What happens when, instead of rushing toward him, you step back? Not with bitterness, but with a quiet confidence that says, if you're not going to value me, I will value myself. That is the moment the emotional dynamic shifts. Most people don't realize that emotional energy is like a current. If someone pushes you emotionally and you immediately push back, you're caught in their rhythm. But when you stop participating in that rhythm, when you stop mirroring the chaos, they're left in emotional freefall. You're not there to catch them anymore. You're not validating their bad behavior. You're no longer responding in the way they're used to. Let me be clear, this is not about ignoring someone to get revenge. It's not about silence as punishment. It's about choosing a response that serves your well-being over one that feeds the ego of someone who has disrespected you. When you step back, emotionally and physically, you break the loop. You stop trying to control the outcome. You stop making their actions your responsibility. And here's where it gets interesting. People feel that shift, even if they don't say it, even if they pretend not to notice, they do. When you stop chasing, they start wondering. When you stop trying to explain your worth, they're left to sit with the discomfort of their own behavior. And in many cases, it's the first time they've been forced to reflect, because you're no longer supplying the emotional feedback they relied on. Suddenly, you're not in a position of weakness. You're not trying to convince them to care. You're the one creating emotional distance, and they don't know what to do with that. That confusion, that silence, it becomes a mirror. And if they have any emotional awareness at all, they'll start to feel the shift internally. Wait, she's not reacting. Why isn't she hurt? Why isn't she trying harder? That's when they begin to realize they don't hold the power anymore. This shift isn't just for them though, it's for you. Because the more you practice stepping back instead of leaning in when disrespected, the more you train yourself to value peace over validation, you stop needing people to make it right. You start making it right for yourself. You become the one who decides what energy is allowed into your space. You stop being available for confusion, chaos, and emotional games. That's when you become untouchable, not because you're hardened, but because you're grounded. And when that man finally does come back around, and often they do, he's met with someone very different. Someone who no longer entertains uncertainty. Someone who learned how to break the cycle and stand firm in her worth. And at that point, whether he gets another chance is up to you, not because you're punishing him, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself who once would have begged for his attention. So the next time someone's behavior pulls you into emotional chaos, don't respond from that chaos. Step out of it. Change the rhythm. Let your calmness be the confusion. Let your stillness be the message. And let the new emotional dynamic speak louder than anything you could say. There's something incredibly disarming about someone who doesn't behave the way we expect. When a man hurts you, most of the time he already has a storyline in his head about how you're going to respond. He thinks he knows the script. Maybe he assumes you'll get angry and lash out. Maybe he expects you to cry, to chase, to beg him to stay, or to explain yourself. Maybe he even believes you'll internalize the blame and try harder just to win back his approval. These assumptions come from patterns he's seen, or even patterns you've unconsciously reinforced. But here's the opportunity. When you stop following the emotional script he's written for you, when you rewrite your part entirely, you force him to face something he never prepared for. Your growth, your unpredictability becomes your power. Imagine he does something hurtful. He pulls away emotionally, speaks to you with disrespect, flirts with someone else, or gives you just enough attention to keep you hanging, but not enough to feel valued. He's playing a role, assuming you'll continue playing yours. That's where most women stay, stuck in a role someone else created. But when you step out of that role and do the unexpected, you break the illusion. He expects tears. You give him calm. He expects confrontation. You give him silence. He expects a long explanation. You simply walk away. And suddenly, he's left alone with the one thing he's not used to facing: himself. That's where the real confusion begins. When someone hurts you and you don't respond with the usual firestorm of emotion, it removes their emotional buffer. They don't get to ping your reaction on drama or shift the blame back to you. Instead, they're left staring at their own behavior with no distraction. And that reflection? That's where the shift happens. Because now he's not thinking about how to defend himself from your accusations. He's thinking about why you're not making any. He's wondering why you didn't fight for the last word, why you didn't send that long message explaining yourself, why you didn't cling when he distanced. And slowly, assumptions start to unravel. The narrative that said she'll never leave turns into, wait, maybe she already did. The belief that he had emotional control now feels flimsy. And he starts to question not only your response, but your standards, your boundaries, your strength. See, what confuses someone who hurts you isn't your pain, it's your power. It's your ability to remain calm in the face of betrayal. It's your ability to walk away from something that no longer honors your worth. That's the moment where his assumptions stop being his safety net and start becoming his wake-up call. And here's what matters most. This shift is not about getting him to chase you. It's not about winning the upper hand. It's about shifting the energy back to yourself, because the moment you stop reacting from a place of emotion and start responding from a place of self-respect, everything changes. You no longer need closure. You don't need validation. You don't need him to say he's sorry, because you've already given yourself something more important: control over your own narrative. The irony is, the more unpredictable your response becomes, the more predictable his reflection becomes. People can only ignore their behavior for so long before it becomes uncomfortable, and you standing firm in your peace becomes a mirror he can't avoid. So when he's alone with his thoughts, long after the silence has stretched out, after the space you created starts to feel cold instead of comforting, he starts asking questions, not just about you, but about himself. That's what happens when you don't conform to the emotional role he tried to assign you. You become the question mark in a sentence he thought had a period. And that's when the shift becomes permanent. Not just for him, but for you. Because once you stop letting someone else's expectations define your emotional response, you become the author of your own power. You don't react, you choose. You don't prove, you protect. And most importantly, you don't chase, you attract. So when a man hurts you, don't give him the reaction he expects. Give him the response he never saw coming. Let him question everything he assumed about you, and maybe even everything he assumed about himself. There's a moment after someone has hurt you when you feel like you need to say something, to explain, to defend, to lash out, to remind them of what they did, to show them the pain they caused. That urge can be overwhelming, especially when the silence between you starts to stretch and every second of it feels like a war between your pride and your vulnerability. But here's what most people never realize. Your silence, when used with intention, is not weakness. It's not passive. It's power. Because silence, when coming from a place of self-respect and emotional clarity, speaks louder than any perfectly worded message ever could. When a man hurts you, he expects a response. Maybe he expects anger, maybe tears, maybe pleading. Whatever the form, he expects some sort of reaction that tells him, I still have emotional power over you. But silence removes that feedback loop. It takes away the emotional payoff. And in doing so, it shifts the entire dynamic. Think of silence as the emotional equivalent of closing a door, not slamming it, not locking it forever, but calmly, clearly saying, this is not acceptable. And you don't need to scream those words to make them land. In fact, the quieter you are, the deeper it hits. Because now he has to fill in the blanks. He has to sit with what you didn't say. That discomfort, that's where the change begins. Silence forces self-reflection. When you're not yelling, when you're not crying, when you're not trying to make him understand, he's left to wonder. He has to guess what you're thinking. And it's in that unknown that his ego begins to unravel. The very silence that once made you uncomfortable now starts making him uncomfortable. And what's important is that this silence isn't about shutting someone out forever. It's about not giving your energy to someone who didn't respect it in the first place. You're not withdrawing out of spite. You're pausing because continuing to speak would cost you your peace. And not everyone deserves access to your voice, especially when they've proven they can't listen with respect. You see, when you react with words in the heat of pain, those words often get twisted, dismissed, or used against you. But when you say nothing, there's nothing to argue with. There's nothing to deny. Your silence becomes the most undeniable truth in the room. And the man who once had emotional power over you now finds himself scrambling to understand a response he can't manipulate. And here's the beautiful part. Your silence isn't just for him, it's for you. It gives you space to reconnect with your own strength. It allows your nervous system to calm. It gives your heart time to settle. And most importantly, it gives you the power to choose your next move with clarity instead of reacting out of impulse. It also sends a very clear message without needing to say a word. You don't get to treat me that way and still have access to me. That kind of quiet boundary is unforgettable because it's not performative. It's not about making him chase or beg. It's simply a reflection of who you are now. Someone who doesn't beg to be treated right. Someone who doesn't argue with disrespect. Someone who walks away with her dignity intact. Eventually, that silence echoes, maybe not today, maybe not even next week, but at some point, when he's alone, when he sees someone else who reminds him of you, when he scrolls past something that makes him think back, your silence will resurface. Not because you wanted it to, but because it meant something. Because you didn't beg, cry, or plead. You simply moved on. And that's the part they remember. That's the part that lingers. Not the last message, not the long explanation, but the stillness, the grace, the poise, the absence of chaos. That's the kind of silence that speaks volumes and leaves a lasting impression no words ever could. So the next time someone hurts you and expects a reaction, try something different. Give them silence, not as a weapon, but as a boundary. Let them sit. Let them feel the weight of your absence, and let yourself feel the strength of knowing you never needed to raise your voice to reclaim your power.